Hi everyone, this is Trident Talks. I'm Max Horseman. I'm a principal consultant here at Trident, and today I'm joined by Matt Muller, Field CISO at Tynes. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me on here.
No, excellent. And basically, for the listeners' context, Matt and I met at Tynes event at Black Cat. We shared some canopies and we got talking at length about the role of a field CISO and Matt's journey into that realm and world. We thought that it would be a valuable discussion to discuss some of the impacts internally and externally and the value that field CISOs add, as well as some of the nuances of the role. So I really appreciate Matt joining today. I think it will be an interesting one. I think a good place to start, Matt, is just talking us through your journey from practitioner to field CISO and what drew you into that world and role.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a practitioner in the security world for the bulk of my career. I actually initially thought I was going to go to university for accounting, and then took my first accounting 101 course and realized that this just math wasn't for me, right? Especially accounting math. And increasingly found myself drawn to this world of cybersecurity and some of the human psychology behind protecting people and organizations from the bad actors that are out there. And I ultimately ended up as the director of security operations over at Coinbase, protecting some cryptocurrency from bad actors and everyone from small-time criminals looking to steal a few bitcoins to nation states that are looking to maybe fund sanctioned programs through cryptocurrency. And that was actually when I met the folks at Tynes as well. I met them sort of very early on in their journey of their startup journey of building out a company, and used the product myself for just about the whole time I was at Coinbase. And after 5 years or so of doing incident response and working in this this pretty fast-paced environment, I kind of realized it was time for me to think about what next steps in my career would look like. I knew I wanted to stay in the cybersecurity world. I also wanted to get a little bit more exposure to what cybersecurity looks like outside of one specific company. And so there were at the time a small set of vendors where I really felt like these were partners, not just people that saw me as a quota to hit for the end of the quarter. And Tynes was one of those vendors. And so I said, look, I'm thinking about what's next for me after Coinbase. I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like. If you have any opportunities for a security style person like me, would love to chat. And Tynes basically said, hey, we'd love to have you on board. We're hiring for a field CISO role. Are you interested? And I said, yes. Also, what is that? And so I got a chance here to sort of learn for myself a little bit about what being a field CISO is, and define it for the organization here. We're just about a year in, and it's been an amazing journey.
Excellent. Actually, that leads us on nicely to our next question. Given that you were unfamiliar yourself, for those in the audience that are unfamiliar, can you describe the role of a field CISO?
Yeah, I think the title field CISO, I think, is relatively new, but a lot of cybersecurity vendors have had something like this role in various different flavors. Whether it's like a principal advisor or somebody that does a little bit more of the not quite consulting, but certainly a little bit more of the advisory and research work in their organization. And at Tynes, what we've sort of broken down the field CISO role into is a couple things. First is around sort of the, I have to put this in air quotes, thought leadership side of things. We want to be able to have, credible, unique opinion on cybersecurity topics. And that's something where, just coming from my background that I have, I'm able to help the organization sort of shape how we approach talking about some of these things, right? We want automation to be something that's not just like a side gig for one person that they sort of maybe remember every couple months. We actually want automation to be a part of a cybersecurity strategy. And so to do that credibly, we have to be able to sort of shape our positioning out there in the market. The second piece is actually working with the customers and prospects who need automation. I can tell you from my own experience, there's a lot of ways to do automation badly, right? Or to think something should be automated when actually you might need a human in the loop, or vice versa, right? You might not realize that a process you're doing manually can be automated. And so helping those folks sort of strategically apply automation, throughout their programs is the second pillar. And the final pillar is around just serving as a conduit between the practitioners, who are in the seat I was in, and our product and engineering teams inside Tines as well. We have some amazingly talented engineers here who can build just about anything that we want. And so what I can do with those folks is sort of help articulate and provide a little bit more color as to the why our customers are asking for these things, right? If they ask for a particular feature, I can help sort of explain, okay, here's where this analyst is going to be sitting, right? Here's the scenario that they're going to be in. Here's what's going to be stressing them out or top of mind for them in this exact moment. And so it helps us build things that are a little bit more relevant, out of the gate for people that are using the Tines product without having to have all this back and forth, right? But, with customers to sort of, ask, is this what you want? No. Is this what you want? No. Is this what you want? No. And so on and so forth, right? So those three pieces around, being able to, sort of have opinions about cybersecurity, be able to work with people to use automation more effectively, and ultimately be able to serve as that feedback loop into the organization, I think has been, sort of where we've landed on, what Tines Field CISOs do. Is that the exact same as what other organizations do? Maybe there's a different mix there, but in chatting with my peers who are in this sort of role, it does roughly fall into those sort of three categories.
Yeah, and I think you've described the role really well. I guess bringing that together in terms of where you see the most value to customers and internally to Tines, just to like connect the dots and kind of summarize the value, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, honestly, I think some of the value comes from figuring out what we don't want to do. For example, if you enter, like a proof of value exercise with Tines, where you're sort of testing out the platform, seeing if it's fit for your use cases, there are times when we want to provide some guidance and say, look, either this is not the right use case for automation, or it's not the use case for like a 30-day test, right? Like, we want to make sure that we're providing like relevant examples and relevant use cases and fitting these demonstrations into exactly what our customers need. But oftentimes it's figuring out like what is this not suitable for, right? I think you can build a lot more trust as a vendor when you say, hey, our product just doesn't work for that use case. I understand you need to solve that problem, but we might not be the right people to go solve it for you, and here's why, right? And just being able to add that level of credibility, it enables people to get to those use cases a little bit more quickly, rather than like, I don't think either Tines or the customer wants us both to spend time struggling on a use case that turns out not to be the right fit, right? And so I think that's ultimately where we would add a lot of value.
Yeah, and trust really stands out there. And I guess moving from kind of the practitioner world into the vendor landscape, what kind of surprised you most when you made that transition?
I think the biggest thing for me personally was just turning off that part of my brain that said, you're responsible for every single thing that happens. Right? Like, as a cybersecurity practitioner, you're very much used to being, kind of the owner of risk, or the describer of risk, and ultimately the person that is on an incident on call rotation. I mean, I had when I deleted PagerDuty from my phone, I almost had a heart attack. I was like, how will people page me if something goes wrong? And I was like, wait a second, I'm in a strategic role now, right? I'm not actually responding directly day to day to incidents anymore. So that was a little bit of an adjustment for me, for personally. I think the other thing as well is not taking for granted that the way I did things in the past is what will equally apply to other organizations. There's a real listening component to all of these things. And so, something I've discovered is, hey, no security team would ever want to do X, Y, or Z in a particular way. That would be absolutely crazy, right? Like, who has an environment like that? And it turns out, of course, like 25% of our customers have an environment like that, because, maybe they've done M&A and they're working for, an 80-year-old company, and the technology stack, through no fault of their own, is just in a really interesting or precarious place, right? And they're still responsible for defending it. They don't get the luxury of defining, the field that they're operating on. And so it was a little bit humbling, right, to be able to say, right, here in theory is this best practice, right? Well, in practice, we just can't apply it. And here's the 8 compelling reasons why. So those are pretty big adjustments for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And I guess with the lack of PagerDuty, you maybe sleep better at night now.
Full night's sleep every single night. It's absolutely amazing.
Good. And obviously, when you're evaluating your move from practitioner, you mentioned at the start of this podcast that you looked at kind of trusted partners or vendors that you viewed as partners, which makes perfect sense, right? Trust is paramount. But has your perspective on vendors changed now that you work for one?
I actually have even more sympathy for the practitioners that have to sort through all the noise that's out there. I mean,
That's a good point.
even at Black Hat, right, where we were walking the vendor floors, you see all these signs, and now that I'm so deeply immersed at one particular vendor, I can tell you, down to like practically like lines of code, how we differentiate from other vendors, and who's doing great here, who has a good solution, who has a bad one. But most people aren't paid to spend the kind of time I do understanding that landscape, right? They kind of have to take on trust a little bit more what's going on. And so yeah, I mean, I think it is really, really challenging out there for people that are purchasing software. There's so many times where I'm like, yes, I know these two vendors say the exact same thing in their marketing taglines, but it's so different under the hood. And if you just had a little bit more time to go unpack that, you'd sort of see the difference here. But yeah, I mean, the good cybersecurity vendors out there are really, really good. And the bad ones are expensive, and it's sometimes hard to tell the difference.
Yeah, and you are right. There's obviously a lot of marketing kind of jargon out there, and obviously the market is increasingly saturated. I think it's like 4,000 vendors at recent count or something, which is
Right.
crazy. So
Right.
I guess a logical question is, have you seen a shift in the way that kind of practitioners evaluate technology to try and cut through this noise that exists in the market now?
Yeah. So one thing that I think has been really encouraging to see over the last couple of years is people are focusing more and more on outcomes versus process. And what I mean by that is, the cybersecurity industry, as for almost as far back as I can remember, has promised that this new solution, this new implementation, this new acronym is the thing that will solve your problems.
Mm,
And I think AI certainly has been the most recent incarnation of that, where if you didn't have AI in your platform, people were sort of selecting you out, right, and saying, well, they don't have AI, so therefore, how good can the solution be?
yeah.
And I think and so then everyone started saying, we're the AI powered this, we're the AI native that, right? And so it just completely saturated the market. And I think over the past couple of years, what we've really seen is an acceleration of people taking a step back and saying, look, I'm not saying that all vendor solutions need to be a black box, but I should care a little bit less about how the sausage is made and more, is this a tasty sausage, right? Is it safe for me to eat? Does it actually provide all the things that I need from the sausage, right? And that may be an overextension of the sausage analogy there, but I think again,
No, I like
having
it.
people that are focused on the outcomes rather than rather than like what particular tech is used in the platform, I think has been really, really heartening to sort of see those approaches.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there's an obvious kind of point that we discussed, and that's balancing kind of being an advocate for Tines, obviously,
Mm.
versus the needs of the customer, and clearly credibility and trust. We've kind of drawn attention to that earlier. So how do you balance the kind of, well, all of those pieces?
Yeah, I think, my credibility and my sort of, independent ability to be able to say, like, we're a good fit, we're not a good fit, so on and so forth, is the thing that makes this role valuable, full stop. If I
Mm,
don't have that independence to be able to say, look, yes, maybe Tines could solve this problem for you, but honestly, it feels like a stretch. Here's a different vendor that will actually solve the problem you're articulating a little bit more effectively than we can. Otherwise, there's just no point for this role. And so I'm certainly grateful to Tines that they've given me the ability to go, have that independence. And obviously, like I wouldn't be at Tines if I didn't believe in the product. But there's also that level of realism that's necessary here. And so I think for anyone in this role, like, or who's working with a field CISO, I talked to a number of field CISOs who are all very much of the same mindset, which is, yeah, it's my independence and my, personal view on these things that gives me the credibility to be a field CISO and not, not any other type of role. So if you're chatting with somebody in this type of role, like, we all take this very, very seriously, in that we can be that trusted advisor. You don't have to worry about, hidden agendas and things like that.
Yeah, it does raise an interesting point though, and that's that you have to have the free rein from your employer, right, to be able to
Right.
do that, and the trust from obviously the vendor, because I can understand that, in some instances, some vendors just simply wouldn't want you to turn away business, right?
Right.
So yeah, I totally get that. And where do you, or what point do you tend to get involved with a customer, and is there any kind of ever any friction in your involvement from the customer?
Yeah, I typically get involved fairly early on when folks are starting to think about, their automation journey. Ultimately, there's a lot of different strategies that you can apply, and a lot of different vendors that you can go with depending on the strategy that you choose. And so my role is typically sort of, earlier in the discussions where people are still sort of thinking about, how does automation strategically, play into what we're trying to do, what's our overall approach, right, and so on and so forth. And it is funny, I will say, even though, again, I'm coming from a practitioner background, coming from, having implemented a whole bunch of automation, there's definitely friction, right? Where people sort of assume, oh, here's another salesperson to go talk to, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I promise you, like this is not my role. But just adding the field in Field CISO, I think still automatically generates a little bit of skepticism and a little bit of distrust, right? When
Mm.
because it's a relatively new title, and so folks just aren't, if folks haven't seen or interacted with Field CISOs before, or anyone sort of in like the Field CXO, Field CIO, Field CTO space, they may not know that there's, inherently this level of independence that we all operate with. And so, yes, I definitely hear from folks who are like, all right, now we're not interested in chatting. We already got the pitch. I'm like, I'm not here to pitch you. I'm here
Yeah.
to actually understand what's going on so we can figure out a strategy.
No, it's as we said, in a saturated market, I can understand why people would be a little bit skeptical, right?
Right.
So I guess it's up to you to try and build the credibility quickly in that
Right.
process, right? Through
Yeah.
all the things that you mentioned. I guess this one's only relevant to a select few, but what are maybe some of the pitfalls for practitioners, that want to move into this kind of role? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think for anyone who's looking to get into this type of role, I do think it's one that, if you are to be very blunt, right? If you're a first year SOC analyst, I don't know that you'll be able to be effective in a Field CISO role, because the reality is, like, it does take a little bit of experience in the cybersecurity world, seeing what's happening, seeing what works, seeing what fails, to be able to go share those experiences with others. That doesn't mean your experiences that you're developing aren't valuable. You just have to develop that pattern recognition, right? And that takes a lot of time. So I do think it tends to be a little bit more of a role suited for folks that are more senior in their career. I also, I think folks will sort of vary in their perspectives on this. I think folks have to think about, sort of long term, what do you want to be, what do you want to be doing, right? If you're super happy with the field that you're in, maybe you have some really deep, narrow technical expertise, and you're seen as a leader in that specifically. Field CISO is broad, right? We work with a wide variety of organizational sizes and goals and missions. And so, again, if you're thinking about this type of role, having that breadth of coverage should feel exciting and not intimidating. But yeah, that said, I mean, I've chatted with a number of CISOs who, are thinking about sort of, what their next career moves look like. And, hey, the water's warm. This is a great way to sort of take a break in between roles even, right? And sort of get some experience out in the field and being able to, work with, I think, to me, a tour of duty as a Field CISO for somebody that's been in the CISO seat for a long time helps level up the industry, right? You're helping to level up the vendor that you're working for. And it honestly helps your peers with sort of cutting through that signal and noise as well. So I do encourage senior leaders to seriously have a think about, doing something like being a Field CISO.
I love that. And yeah, the leveling up piece is really interesting. And I guess looking back, you were open-minded about a new challenge. You kind of spoke to Tynes about it, but you didn't necessarily know you were going to go into a Field CISO role when you had that conversation. So is there anything that you wish you'd known before making the move? Hope that's
Yeah.
not too much of a loaded question, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think before making that move, I certainly wish that I had had a little bit of a deeper understanding of what it means to actually be a good customer of a cybersecurity vendor, and also just a little bit more understanding of the honestly the compensation dynamics that go into how security teams work. I think really good cybersecurity buyers and really good cybersecurity sellers understand that this is like a long-term relationship that you're trying to build, and they act that way, right? We have some really incredible AEs here at Tynes who, they ask me, for input, for advice, and all that sort of thing. But ultimately, it's with the goal of building those long-term relationships, and they understand sort of that they're not trying to sell just for that next quarter. They're trying to sell for the next 4 years, or however long we maintain those relationships. And so I think I was a little too guarded at first coming into this role, where I'm like, okay, typical salespeople that are going to be asking me for X, Y, or Z, yada, 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 right? And like, no, in the same way that, I go out and build trust with the practitioners and customers, I need to build that, same sort of connection and trust with the folks that are actually, responsible for selling the product here. Because ultimately my job is to help level them up, right? And so, I think I wish I'd come into this with a little bit more, a little bit less skepticism of the whole like cybersecurity sales process.
Well, at the end of the day, you may have been a little bit skeptical, but I think kind of your experiences have been really positive, and I definitely think there's a lot of value in the role that you do. In terms of like how you see the role evolving, obviously a field CISO, like you said, in the grand scheme of cybersecurity, it's a fairly new evolution. So do you see where this is going? Is there further evolutions or areas that you think that the role could add even further value?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I would love to see this role and this title sort of gain wider recognition, mostly because, there are sort of two camps of cybersecurity people that I interact with now. They're the ones who have worked with somebody who's been in a field CISO role before. They understand that we are all still practitioners at heart. They're willing to chat. They're willing to share. And then the folks who are sort of in the camp of like, oh, you went to a vendor, yeah, you're dead to me, right? Like this is no longer you're in sales now, right? You're no longer a security person. The reality is, anybody who's come from a cybersecurity background and is working in this type of role, like we're all still security people. And so what I would love to see, continue to evolve here is sort of that, the community and industry relationships, where we can all understand that. Look, just because again, I'm at a vendor. I mean, in a way, everybody's at a vendor, right? Like even if you're doing security at a B2C company, you're still at a vendor. We all work for companies. The real question is, are we here in ways to advance the cybersecurity industry mission of like protect people, protect organizations? If we are, we're on the same team. And so, I would love to see that sort of, recognition continue to evolve. And I think it's up to us, in the field CISO community to be able to make sure we're upholding those things, right? Like if we're still part of trusted, industry sharing groups or communities or whatever, upholding that privacy and upholding those relationships is still important. We have to demonstrate that just because we're working for vendors, we're still worthy of that trust, right? But at the same time, recognizing that we are still security people, right? And I hope to see that the role and its place in the industry continue to evolve in that way.
Yeah, so my takeaway from that is a lot about the perception of the role and
Right.
people's understanding of the value, which hopefully this podcast will draw attention to, right? So we're on the way. No, listen, I really appreciate all the thoughts that you've shared today. I think my kind of key takeaway from today is that clearly trust is paramount, but that a lot of the value comes from, like you said, the leveling up on both sides, right? You're a conduit between obviously the vendor and of course the end user, but on both sides that can add real value, whether it be from the sales people that you're supporting with really getting to grips with the solution, etc., and the use cases, be it the end customer when potentially there isn't a fit there, and you're actually helping them navigate challenges that maybe they wouldn't have been able to do themselves, and cut through some of that noise. So yeah, I definitely see the value. Are there any other kind of thoughts that you've got in terms of like a takeaway from today?
I mean, I think the only thing that I would leave folks with is, again, whether you're purchasing from a cybersecurity vendor or you're thinking about this type of role, definitely take advantage of the discussions that are available, right? If nothing else, I have been a sounding board for people that said, hey, we actually don't need your input on our strategy here. What we do need is a little bit of feedback. We're pretty sure this is the right way. We just want to get an independent pair of eyes on what we're trying to do. And I've had those conversations, and they've been great. And sometimes, honestly, all I can add is 2 thumbs up, right? Like, yeah, I think you all are. Turns out y'all are smarter than me, and I might actually borrow some of this, right, for future conversations. But I think the more folks are willing to invest in those strategic conversations up front, the better the outcomes are going to be as they think about actual implementation, right? That's, what is the old saying? It's figuring out where to hit the hammer versus the actual hammer stroke itself that actually makes the difference.
Excellent. And I know you're busy on the event circuit. We discussed that before we started recording. And I know you're a big networker as well. I mean, we shared canopies together, so you took the time to speak to me. So in terms of where listeners can connect with you, I mean, I'll post your LinkedIn with the episode, but where are you going to be in the coming weeks? Have you got any events planned? Is there anywhere where you'd like to draw attention to?
Yeah, I'll be at Falcon in Vegas. That's coming up. I'll be in London for the Gartner Risk Summit after that. Likely at maybe see a Black Hat EU in December if all works out. Bunch of Black Hat stuff coming up. And then I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I also sporadically write thoughts at buildingsecops.com. It's my blog. Where again I get to sort of exercise some editorial independence, right? It's not just Heinz content. Love to say hi to folks at events. It's one of my favorite places to go and meet new people and learn what they're doing. So well, hopefully, I'm sure see some of y'all at various events in the near future.
Exactly. Matt, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I think it's been a great episode, and hopefully I'll see you when you're in London next at the Risk Summit.
Absolutely. I look forward to seeing you again.